With that, welcome to the Brohemian Rhapsody show presented by, still don't have a sponsor. But click like and subscribe for all future content. Maybe we'll get a sponsor. On this show, we're going to discuss the Sunday, the 3rd of January. New year, new me. New year, new you. Bears lost by a lot to the Packers today, but they're in the playoffs. Your thoughts?
I mean, backdoor into the playoffs. Somehow they managed to do this. We know their opponent. It's the Saints. Before we talk about the Saints, I just want to talk about this season and just like how crazy it was. I mean, thinking all the way back to the first game against the Lions where they should have lost. Games that they won where they beat Tampa Bay with that weird, Tom Brady, whatever. And then they lost to the Saints already, right? They did play them?
Yeah, in overtime. That was a 26-23 loss. That was the game where Cole Kmet fumbled, but he didn't fumble. That game was a Sunday afternoon game, but it went to like 10:30 at night, it felt like.
Yeah.
They
play, right?
Drew Brees did play, yes.
Oh, he did? Okay.
That was back when the defense was playing good, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But
yeah, and then the loss to the Vikings, just the 6-game skid, and then all of a sudden they come back and they could score points. And I don't know if I've ever seen an NFL team with such a clear reversal of their strengths. They talk about the Bears defense. And at the beginning of the year, the defense did keep them in games, and now it's like they can't stop a nosebleed.
It's to your point. The Bears defense week 1, 23 points they gave up, then 13 points, then 26, then 19, then 19 again against Tampa, 16 against Carolina, 24 against the Rams, 26 against the Saints, only 24 against the Titans, and only 19 against the Vikings. And Rams, Saints, Titans, and Vikings were all losses. Then the bye week happened, and then they gave up 41, 34, 7 to the Texans, 27 to the Vikings, 17 to Jacksonville, and 35 to the Packers. So before the bye week, they only gave up, looks like the highest point total was 26. Was the highest point total they gave up. And they gave up 26 to Atlanta and 26 to the Saints. And then they've given up 41, 34, 27, and 35. So I don't – we should be happy. I think frustrated is a proper feeling. I mean, disappointing would be if they didn't make it. Control your own destiny, disappointment and anger. I think frustration's a fair one. This game was basically, to me, kind of just a snapshot of the season. First drive, it's like, where has this been all year? And then the defense can't stop a nosebleed. And then at halftime, they actually make adjustments, which they rarely do in the third quarter, and they get stops. And then the offense can't convert for touchdowns. And then just falls apart in the fourth quarter. You're playing the Saints, as you mentioned. We'll touch on it briefly. Due to COVID protocol, if the Bears and the Saints play Saturday, no Alvin Kamara. They play Sunday. He'll play. You and I think you'll agree with me. The NFL will make it somehow that the Bears Saints are Sunday. Yeah. Whether it's the 140 or 440 game, it will not be the primetime game Sunday night. I feel like they'll reserve the 2 primetime games for what they feel will be the 2 closest games, which will not be the Bears Saints. So if anything, I think they'd either be 440 Saturday or 140 Sunday. So, and it's, again, should be, I'll buy back in. Look, a month ago I'm done. I'm not emotionally involved. I can't, at noon today I was wired. For 3.5 hours I just sit down and do breathing exercises. I was so amped up for the game. And then here I am. 7:30 feels like 2 a.m, just drained, exhausted. But they're in the playoffs. They're 8-8, the definition of football hell. And, if we want to talk about today's game, 3 drop picks. I mean, and again, it's like every team's going to have drop picks. It is what it is, but it's like you look at the 3 players that drop picks. What we had Mingo, Vildor, and then Eddie Jackson. It's like Eddie gets paid to make that catch, right? I mean, you can live with Mingo being a 5th on the depth chart, depth signing. Made a good play, by the way. Made Aaron Rodgers change his angle. And again, it was a 3rd down. It was actually a very beneficial play, but it's like you can kind of live with that. But it's like, Eddie's the highest paid safety or 2nd highest paid safety in the game. And he just, that was huge. And I don't know. Go ahead.
He didn't step up. And that defense does have a lot of holes. And I know when without Jalen Johnson and Roquan Smith went out for a majority of the game, like you depend on these guys to step up and really, fill those holes. And Eddie Jackson just a glaring example of he didn't. On the Packers touchdown that I don't know how many yards it was, but it seemed like 80. That touchdown pass, like he bit up on a route instead of going back and helping a backup linebacker who was one-on-one with a guy who runs a 4.4 40, which I don't know how you can justify that. I know it's super frustrating to have Aaron Rodgers, dink you down the field, and because he can do that, he can exploit the matchups, but you can't get burned. I think the Bears, they know how to beat the Packers. I think everyone knows how to beat the Packers.
Yeah, like volleyball. Right?
Like you control the ball.
Yeah.
And touchdowns. You have to score touchdowns too.
Yeah, you have to. To me, the 2 things today's game were 4th and 1 every 2 plays. Every 4 plays. Kevin, dumbass Kevin. 4th and 1 every 4 plays, and injuries. If Mooney's hurt, by the way, did I see that correctly? After Mooney went out of the game, Javon Wims he was in on that 4th and 1, not Anthony Miller. Anthony Miller's free falling now to 4th in the depth chart for receivers. I mean, first off, how is Javon Wims still employed? I mean, it's a recession. It's a pandemic. That's probably the better word. I'm not out for people's jobs. Going back to the Saints game.
Yep.
Straight just punched a cornerback for no reason. I mean, there's probably a reason, but no valid reason, I should say. And at that point, again, you lost by 3 points. That made the Bears. I don't think it was a turnover possession against the Saints. I think it was a punt. How is he still on the team? It's like at that point you just make him a sacrificial lamb and say, look, this is unacceptable, especially because he's not 12. He's not. You're paying Jimmy Graham. You're paying 80. He's not Khalil Mack. He's not Eddie Jackson. He's not Akeem Hicks. Like you make that guy when your number 5 receiver does something stupid, you make him a sacrificial lamb and say, yeah. And I don't know. It's the end. I'm worried about if Mooney's out and Miller's behind Wims, and Roquan's hurt, and if I never thought I'd say this, little man, but we need Buster Screen back. We need him back. It's a lot.
Yes, I thought the secondary, I guess against bad teams played surprisingly well considering the injuries and the backups. But I think the thing that stands out most about the defense is all of our so-called stars. I mean, Akeem Hicks gets all this credit. He had 1 pressure today? Maybe. I mean, maybe he plugged up a few holes. Like I don't notice him. I don't notice him. I don't notice Fuller. I noticed Eddie Jackson in a bad way.
Yeah.
Khalil Mack made 1 play. At least they said once, I guess. Like
Robert Quinn put on his uniform today, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. I think that's the most like Akeem Hicks, his position. The game better than I do. Like he's gonna do things that don't show up in the stat sheet. That if you actually sat down, rewatch, wrote down the film, it's like okay, he did clog that hole, which caused it to be a 2-yard gain because the guy, you're right back, got to cut back or whatever that may have you.
Yeah.
But Robert Quinn gets really, I mean, he's getting paid a lot of money to get a lot of one-on-one matchups, and he's done very little this year. And we have a full sample size of 16 games. This is no longer, it's been 4 games and COVID and all that, and no training camp, no full offseason. It's like we have 16 games. And I believe he had 1 strip fumble. That sounds right. I think he had like one fumble recovery against Tampa, I think, or I mean, I'm just mixing the teams, but like, I'm with you. Like when your depth is depleted, and as you mentioned, no Jalen Johnson, no Buster Screen, and then Roquan goes down with an injury. That's where if you're 39, 52, 96, and whatever Robert Quinn's number is, I never know because I know it's 94. I know it's 94, but yeah. It's a joke. It's like that's where you have to be like, all right, we're the guys everyone's looking at. Khalil Mack didn't have a sack. I think it's you can touch on this. No starting left tackle for the Packers, one sack. That's just and so in 2 games with the Packers this year, the Bears had 1 sack.
Yeah, it's really bad, and I think frustration again. It's about matchups, right? Like the NFL is so much about exploiting matchups. So the Packers knew that the Bears were depleted in their secondary, right? So yes, that third guy is going to be like that's a favorable matchup. Well, guy making his first start at left tackle all year. I think it was his first start.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
That should have been a really favorable matchup for Khalil Mack and Quinn. And it was talked about once, maybe. That was it. It didn't even notice. So, like, that's how stars are able to plug up holes, or you make decisions like that. And
also, I think it's reflected on coaching staffs, too. Exploiting that, preparing for it, scheming for it, executing it. I think it's very easy when you have 12 as your quarterback, referring to the guy up north. It's very easy that things you lack can be covered up because of what he can do. He gives you a little extra everywhere. But to your point, like, I think you would just say, if you were in the defensive room for the Bears, would you say, hey, we're going to make this left tackle. If a backup left tackle making his first start in Week 17 in a must-win game beat us, then hey, you know what? They beat it's whatever. But I didn't, again, maybe he did. Maybe he just. I didn't look at that particular matchup, and specifically, I should say. But like to your point, like man, when Duke Shelley's on Devontae Adams, it's like I'm pulling my hair on my head. It's Fuller. Again, he had plays earlier in the year, and again, like part of it might be the ball's not thrown to his guy. That Rodgers is like, look, whoever 23 is guarding, that guy's not getting the ball, and that could be again. That's something that wouldn't show in the stat sheet, but you look back, you're like, yeah, he ain't throwing near 23. He's basically saying, I'm going to make Duke Shelley's of the world beat us, and that's fine. And then then that's Kyle Fuller's doing what he's supposed to do. It's he's giving 12 one less option. So,
one last thought that frustrates me as a Bears too is every time Aaron Rodgers has one of these games, they talk about him like he is a god. He's never lost a football game. I've seen him lose multiple football games, and particularly in the playoffs, right? Like he makes good decisions, but you beat him the same way every time. When I think about who has beaten him, okay, if you can get in his face with 4 guys, doesn't matter if you're 3, 4, whatever. If you rush forward, you can get in his face. You could frustrate him. You could hit him a couple of times and then control the ball on the other side and run. Think about like the San Francisco 49ers.
Last year, just bully ball. Yeah, no, look, you say about a lot of quarterbacks, if you get 1 sack on Aaron Rodgers, I don't care who you are, you're basically saying you're hoping you put up 45 points. Like it's to that point of, you need to make him one-dimensional. And yes, Devontae Adams is an absolute monster. But then they have a bunch of guys. I'm talking about receivers and tight ends. They have a lot of guys that are 5th and 6th round draft picks, undrafted free agents that do very well for what they are. And that is, again, I hate to say this, kudos to the organization that up north, because they do draft and develop whatever talent a guy has. They squeeze every drop out of the talent. Where our team enjoys, getting very little and then having the guy possibly have success elsewhere at certain positions, over time, in certain draft positions, usually in the first 2 rounds. But we'll see. We're going to need Anthony, if Mooney's out, we're going to need Anthony Miller. Besides the fumble, I thought Cole Kmet had a good game. He had a lot of passion. Again, the extra effort led to the fumble, and it's one of those, and that fumble is one of those plays where if it's called down on the field, it would have been reversed. So it wasn't a clear as day, like really bad fumble. But we were texting throughout the game, and you made the mention before that. I think on the second catch, like he needs to make sure he's got a good grasp on the ball.
Yeah, I love the passion. He needs to that, and you know what? He is a rookie. Like that rookie thing, he's still developing. You know, it's a different thing when you're getting hit by an ACC defender coming in, the second guy, as opposed to these NFL linebackers.
And let's not forget, last year he missed for the Irish. He missed the first month of the year with a broken collarbone. Came back a little early because they were going to Athens, played Georgia, and then again didn't have a full training camp. And as we've alluded to, where I'm, maybe a little hypocritical, but for a rookie who didn't play a full season his last collegiate year and probably could use a full training camp, I think preseason would have done him wonders along with that. But very happy with Kmet and Mooney. Vildor dropped the pick, but he wasn't exposed, I guess. Josh Woods needs to go back to whatever job he was doing a month ago. But again, part of this is on pace where we lack depth. We lack it, I think, everywhere on defense. There's not one level. I mean, I guess defensive line because there's no Eddie Goldman, and you are. I'll say defensive line because we've gotten enough out of the Brent Urbans and Mario Edwards of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could say linebacker depth. If you put Mingo as a linebacker, I guess, but it's one of those things where like we have no safety depth. It doesn't feel like it, at least. I know we're down to our fourth string corner, technically fifth string, because if you remember, Artie Burns was brought in to be the fourth string corner. He tore his ACL in mini camp or whatever. Excuse me, but I just I'm glad we're in the playoffs, and 6 days from now or 5 days from now, depending on when the game is, I'll be all in. I'll be invested again because I love being in this abusive relationship called being a Bears fan. But this is kind of football hell, little man, because Pace and Nagy are coming back. Yep. There is no way in hell the McCaskies are going to pay a GM and coaching staff who's made the playoffs 2 of the last years in a pandemic. They're going to pay them not to be here. There is no chance.
Oh, yeah.
And the Bears will have a second-place schedule next year. I'm not going to look into next year's schedule yet. I'm going to go to bed tonight, decent hour hopefully, and just focus on the Saints. But this team's destined to be 7-9 and 6-10 next year. I mean, it's just there's no cap, no Allen Robinson, no quarterback answer. You can move on from Massey, create $5 million cap space, move on from Buster Screen if you want to, and Jimmy Graham, get you $10 million between the two of them, but that's not enough to replace the glaring holes. And again, isn't it funny? But last thing before we move on, a month ago we talked about how the offensive line was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say the offensive line, James Daniels comes back, and then they add a piece, whether it's a tackle to replace Jermaine Ifedi, a center, what have you. I think a tackle would be more of a need and keep Musafir at center and then have Daniels and Whitehair at guards. But wouldn't you say the offensive line now is it's good enough? It's good. I think it's above average. I would say it's probably the best verb, but it's not a liability like it was 6 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they played a solid game. I mean, I can't think of a time. I mean, I know they came up short on a couple of like 3rd and 1s and things like that, but they overall played really well. Before we move on from the Bears, I just want to make a quick prediction because I think this is like when you mentioned football hell, I think that's how it's going to end. I think it's going to be a close game against the Saints. I think Mitch will play well enough so that everyone throws their hands up in the air and says, I don't know about this guy. Right. And we're going to be put in an awkward position of like, do we try to sign him or let him go? Or, what are we doing here? I think there'll be more questions after next week than answers. What do you think?
Okay. I'll say this. If Mitch plays decent or well enough, I still think he's destined. And again, given the fact that it's a pandemic and given the fact that, again, NFL, I don't know how the cap's going to work because they still got their TV money. So I don't know if that's going to, doesn't matter that they didn't sell any hot dogs or beers in the stadiums this year. But, you look at similar first round top 10 quarterbacks who had to move on from their original teams. Tannehill's first contract with the Titans was to be a backup quarterback. Marcus Mariota's contract with the Las Vegas Raiders was to be a backup quarterback. Jameis Winston's contract with the Saints, backup quarterback. Bridgewater, when he left the Vikings to go to the Saints, backup quarterback. Or did he go elsewhere first? Bridgewater, he got traded to the Saints.
I think.
I see. I'm losing my mind. I thought, didn't he go to the Jets? Didn't he go to the Jets for some reason? Yeah, he went to the Jets. That's right. He went to the Jets. Yeah. See, I still got it.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like, what direction are you going in? Like what are you doing here? And especially with Mitch. By the way, even more confusing, right? What if he plays just well enough to beat the Saints and then goes up to Lambeau and gets demolished again?
Well, and here's another thing too, little man. Like, win or lose, Bears are picking in the teens, upper teens. They are a bad enough football team where it should be simple. It's like best player available. Because they have holes everywhere. They have aging parts everywhere. They lack depth at a lot of positions. If you lose Allen Robinson, now that kind of creates the need to draft a receiver. The only position I'd say they don't need to draft is running back, because Tree Cohen comes back and you got Montgomery. So, but you know what that means? They'll draft a running back probably in the 3rd or 4th round. So, it's one of those things where it's an easy answer of best player available, because you have needs at A, B, C, D, and E, which you and I have discussed this 1,000 times. I feel that, especially at football, where you have so many positions and injuries happen so frequently, that every year it should be best player available. I don't think you should ever just draft solely on need, because then you're going to overdraft and, draft a talent that is way below where you're drafting him. Shane McClellan, Kevin White, and the list goes on and on. So I'm with you. Regardless of what happens, this isn't going to happen. The Bears can win the Super Bowl, or they can get absolutely boat raced by the Saints, and it's still going to be a lot of, oh boy. And if they get boat raced by the Saints, it's going to be, Nagy's going to be kind of that Bill O'Brien, Dan Quinn, on the hot seat, not quite, that can just lead to a lost season next year. And then you're looking at Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks a year older, Dan Trevathan a year older. And, again, I'm going to end on this with the Bears. I'm going to feel better as the week goes on, because it's playoff football. It's one more week of football, one more week that I don't have to, devote all my time to just the Blackhawks and the Bulls. So it's delaying some tough, winter and spring nights ahead as a sports fan. But speaking of teams disappointing, let's talk about it, get it over with. I've had a day. We've had about 48 hours to marinate. College football playoff is over. Alabama takes care of business. Our Notre Dame Fighting Irish lose again on the national stage. I'll throw it to you first, since I'll probably be a little more passionate about it. But you watched it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it was pretty obvious that Notre Dame did close the gap when it comes to the line of scrimmage. I think their line played well enough that they had a chance at the end of the game if they would have done other things well. Skill-wise, though, like 7-on-7 with just skill players, they had to play Alabama. I think it would be even worse than it was, because they just don't match up. We have Northwestern reject. Not reject. He chose to go to Notre Dame, but whatever. Northwestern leftover, and they have who's probably going to win the Heisman Trophy, And by the way, like,
who's their number 2 receiver? Because Jalen Waddle's hurt. So
right.
Yeah, to your point, yeah.
And yeah, Mac Jones is probably like a beneficiary of all this talent around him, but still all that talent is around him. And Notre Dame did not stop, their talent. I don't think they did a good job of scheming in a way that could stop their talent. And they waited too long to play to their strengths. I mean, and I think some of that has to do with all of this. It's so weird that like you can tell sort of the mood of a game even like right when it starts. I mean, Ian Book looks scared. Even their strength offensive line didn't play super well towards the beginning of the game. It took them a little bit to sort of like get angry and then get invested. I do think they're getting closer, but again, now they need to maintain their line of scrimmage recruits and recruit more skill guys, and then I think they'll be okay and can compete with an Alabama. But unfortunately, that's what it was. I will say this: I watched that game. I watched the other game. I've popped into a few bowl games. I think like the committee absolutely got it right, and that they were the number 4 team in the country. Yeah, there's a little bit of a gap between number 1 and number 4 this year, but that's what it is. Like, it is what it is. If you want to hate on Notre Dame, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But they were the 4th best team in the country, and that's that. What are your thoughts?
To your last point, A&M. So again, the 3 teams you can make, I think, a valid argument to be the 4 seed besides Notre Dame would be A&M, Oklahoma, and then Cincinnati was undefeated. Well, Cincinnati lost to Georgia, so check mark. Oklahoma beat a Florida team, but Oklahoma also blew a 20-point lead against Kansas State, I believe, or a 3-score lead against Kansas State early in the year, and also lost to Iowa State. So it basically comes down to A&M versus Notre Dame, and you have 2 games you can compare them. A&M and Notre Dame both played Alabama and North Carolina. They beat North Carolina by the same score. Now, granted, A&M did it on a neutral site by scoring a touchdown with 90 seconds left to beat them by 14, but still the same. And then Notre Dame lost by less points than A&M did to Bama. So to your point, I think they got it right. If your whole argument is, well, I don't want Notre Dame in the playoff because they don't win based on years past, they don't deserve, the 2020 team doesn't deserve to be there because the 2018, 2012, 1999 team failed. If sports ever comes to that, that's like the NBA saying, well, the Clippers don't deserve to go to the playoffs. So they never get past the second round. Hey, the Chicago Cubs didn't deserve to go past, they haven't won a World Series 100 years. The Oakland A's in baseball didn't win a playoff series till this year. So they don't deserve to go to the playoffs, in 2017 or 18 because, they lose all the time. It's still a results business. And yes, the Notre Dame program has a big stink right now of they don't win the big games. And they look overwhelmed and manhandled for the most part, which is a fair argument. And because, again, it's a results business. Like, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, well, 2012, no, it was a manhandling. I hate the Notre Dame fans that are like, well, we covered. Or like against last year against Georgia, well, we only lost by a touchdown. Look, I want to win. I want the team to win. I don't go to bed like, hey, you know what? Covered. Or hey, 1 possession, good job. No, it's like a loss is a loss. Do I feel better about this loss, like moving forward, than I did about 2012? Absolutely. Because to your point, the gap is there in the trenches. Now the problem is, as you said, the skill position, besides running back, I feel like Notre Dame's running back groups, and this has been going on for a while. You look back during the Josh Adam years in 2018 with Dexter Williams, and they had Jafar Armstrong as the number 2, and they had Tony Jones at the time. You look back 2012, and they had Theo Riddick and George Atkinson and Sierra Wood, who's a piece of shit. I don't like he is a piece of shit, but but the running back position Brian Kelly's had a good grasp on. And again, going into next year, they have Kyron Williams. They're going to have Chris Tyree's going to be a true sophomore, and Sebo Flemister's going to be back. So, and the tight end group, they still have Michael Mayer. They have some highly recruited receivers. Jordan Johnson is going to be a sophomore next year, maybe probably redshirt freshman probably. He was a 4 or 5-star recruit. And then incoming freshman Deion Colson, 4-star recruit receiver. But to your point, they're not there, but the committee got it right. And good on Ohio State for shutting up Dabo. Good. I don't like Ohio State, but good on them. They showed up. They looked like trash against Northwestern and throttled Clemson. And hopefully it's a good game. We'll see. It sucks that it ended like that, especially, the back-to-back losses. The big position, and I want to get your thoughts before we close this up and recap it. I think a big position, a question for Notre Dame. Well, two questions. Defensive coordinator, Clark Lee's officially now the head coach at Vanderbilt, like officially no longer employee at Notre Dame. Any names you like, and I can give you my thoughts. And also the quarterback position. Ian Book is gone. He's not coming back, even though I think he has the option to because of COVID. He's gone. So would you like to see Notre Dame dip into the transfer portal, or do you want them to stay in-house with Drew Pine, Brendan Clark, or the true freshman Tyler Bushnell? I need to learn that name. I've sent to you his YouTube clips way too many times. Would you want? What are your thoughts? Defensive coordinator in the quarterback position.
You know what? I really want a quarterback with a story and maybe some sort of chip on his shoulder would be great. I mean, I know Ian Book should have that technically, but it never really seemed like he did. He tended to seem like almost afraid of the big moments. When I look at the two quarterbacks who are in the championship now, right? You look at Mac Jones, and this is a guy who everyone said, well, you'll get your master's degree and it'll be fine. And this 5-star recruit's coming in and he's going to be the next, Tua. He's the next guy at Bama. And he said no and competed and won that job and has played pretty well. We talked about his weapons, but he's played pretty well. Mm-hmm. And then you look at Justin Fields, who could almost barely beat Northwestern. I mean, he didn't really do anything to help his team very much in that game. It was all the offensive line pretty much. And, the running back had a really good game, Sermon. But this game, he was super motivated by because so many people talked about Trevor Lawrence, how great he is. He's the number 1 overall pick, Then Dabo comes out and ranks them 11th. Mm-hmm. Like, there was all this fuel to his fire, and you could see it, right? When he took that hit and he's like coming back in, there was no question. Like, he wanted to be there. He wanted to win. He wanted it so bad. Like, he had something to prove. Both those guys have something to prove. And I think when you're talking about especially 19, 20, 21-year-old people, men, like
mm-hmm. Young men, yeah,
that matters. And so I would love for Notre Dame to even have some sort of competition. Maybe it is a grad transfer and the 5-star recruit that come in and compete and figure something out because I think that Ian Book was maybe a little too comfortable, and that doesn't always lead to success. So I really don't know. It would be great, honestly, if this 5-star could come in and play really well and continue that legacy with the offensive line. That would probably be like my preference because at least there's like hope and direction.
Yeah.
That, but I don't know.
Well, I think Tyler's gonna be as a 4-star technically, but he's flirting on that verge. But he's still high skilled. Thank you for ignoring the defensive coordinator question. That was beautiful. But one name that's been circulating online as a rumor is Jack Cohen, the quarterback from Wisconsin, who was appended by the freshman. He's a graduate transfer. Again, it kind of sits down if you're that coaching staff and you truly think you're a playoff team, which Brian Kelly, I'll say this, Brian Kelly's press conference made me feel a lot better after the game, where he was very assertive in we're going to be back. You hate us? Tough. It wasn't the, oh, shucks, we really got our ass handed to us 2012. It was more of a, look, it was there. They were down 21-7 with the ball in Alabama's territory, and Ian Book had that Mitch Trubisky like reception, and you were just so deflated. But I don't know, to me, Cohen would be another Ian Book, a glorified game manager. And unless the weapons on the perimeter all of a sudden become elite, you need more than a game manager. It kind of goes hand in hand, right? Like we said, Mac Jones is probably a glorified game manager. But when you have those weapons, that's all you need to be. And we'll see. Defensive coordinator, my thoughts are this. Bob Diaco's unemployed. No, thank you. No, thank you. There's rumors Mike Elko, who was the DC in 17, who left in 18 to go get a better paycheck at A&M, wants to come back. No, thank you. Clark Lee was promoted after Elko left. He was the linebacker coach, and they promoted within. The defensive line coach, Elston, I think his first name is Mike, actually. Mike Elston, he's the defensive line coach. He's also the associate head coach, or maybe, I think it's associate, might be assistant head coach. But I look at which level of defense for Notre Dame lacked the most talent this year, meaning you look at the linebacking group, they have Joker, top 10 pick, or top 15 pick maybe for the NFL. You look at the secondary group, Kyle Hamilton's a top 5 pick, I think, in 2022's draft. The defensive line has good, not great players that played at their max level. Supposedly he's really good in recruiting. And again, you look at, last year's defensive line with Kareem and Romeo Okwara, they've had guys, they've kind of been a machine over the years of getting guys who can get after the quarterback and getting a production out of it. I would like to see him get bumped up to DC, especially if he's going to stick with the same beliefs and thoughts that Clark Lee. I like staying within and going with that, and need Tommy Rees to grow a little bit as an offensive coordinator, just a little bit. But yeah.
I like the idea of growing from within instead of retreads, especially if people are trying to come back. No, you left for a reason because you were growing it. If he's doing his job and doing it well, then, he deserves the bump and see how it goes. If Brian Kelly trusts him enough to make him the, whatever they call that,
assistant head coach, associate head coach, I should know this, but again, drained, exhausted, tough football weekend. But yeah, no, to your point, if he got that title, that means that he's more than capable of being a defensive coordinator. I don't see how he's capable of that, being right in the coach's ear to not being able to call plays. So, but yeah, we'll see. With that, we'll do our final thoughts. I didn't even introduce this. It's me and Little Man tonight. Two man tandem tag team tonight. I didn't even introduce. I was so depressed. Went right to the Bears. Final thoughts as we close up. I think it's our 3rd episode of Brohemian Rhapsody. I'll throw it to you first. Any final thoughts? Anything we talked about or didn't talk about tonight?
Tough football weekend. I'll touch very quickly on our future, winter sports, Strom guy's contract, and the Bulls need to stop winning games. If you're a true Bulls fan, you say stop winning games.
I love how you touched on Dylan Strom. As we now know, Kirby Doc is out, and Jonathan Taves is going through something that appears to be very, very serious. So, which sucks, but I do want him, as a human to human, I want him to be okay. We are 10 days away from hockey. I'm glad you touched on that. I will be all in until the first game at Tampa. Tampa will raise the banner and probably beat the piss out of the Hawks 7-2. But more, before 10 days from now, World Juniors is still going on. USA squeaked by, kind of ugly win last night in the quarterfinals, as it tends to be when you're a heavily favored team looking ahead. They're in the Final Four. It's going to be USA-Finland tomorrow, and then Canada and Russia in the other matchup. So should be a good game. Finland plays a pretty strict clog up the middle type game, but it's been a great tournament for some guys. Unfortunately, the Hawks have one prospect who's been more of a fourth line energy guy. But for any hockey fan who watches this, so any relative of ours who I send the YouTube link to, but anyone who watches this, do yourself a favor. Trevor Zegras starting on the first line, winger for the Team USA Anaheim Ducks pick. Very easy game to watch. So excited hockey's back. Hockey is our probably it was my number one sport, and as a fan. And good news is we've got one more week of Bears football. So with that,
can't wait.
Like and subscribe. Bear down.